Hello everyone, I'm here in Kerbal Space Program of the ASCA spaceplane to introduce one of the special payloads of the ASCA spaceplane. I have mentioned it before, but I had not modeled it yet, and that is the laser option. So here in the cargo bay, and it's one of the reasons why the cargo ramp is the way it is, the cargo ramp drops, and in the bay now we have a laser. And it looks like that. It looks vaguely like the Hubble Space Telescope. It sort of operates in the opposite direction if you think about it. But as I understand it, this is how a space laser would go. And it has, up at the top here, you can see those red things. Let me move Kerbal Alarm Clock. Okay. The red things are capacitors. Then we have a battery bank here. Of course, it gets fed by the reactors from the space plane, so that's 200 kilowatts. But 200 kilowatts, it can give you some laser, but it can't give you really powerful laser. So if you want the really powerful laser shots, you need the capacitors and the battery bank, and that allows you to get the really stunning stuff. And then we have the extending part where basically it's just a whole lot of electrical wires going down. The control unit is back here, the actual laser is here, and then there's the mirrors that are necessary for focusing it on the target. And of course we have the hinges. So we've got the hinges in silver foil there, and it can swing left to right 45 degrees either way, or it can swing down by about 10 to 15 degrees. I think it's 10 degrees. So of course, it can't go up because then it hit the space plane. But that's why I wanted it to be dropped down like this. If we have it up there, it's sort of, I mean, it'd be better for certain applications to be going up. But then this way, we also have the ability to have the stuff come out of the bay like this. So it's dual purpose like that. So yeah, we have it down here because we can then have a dual purpose ramp instead of just a single thing happening. So this all ends up being 3.4 tons. As far as I can tell, I manually decided that the batteries and the capacitors would be 500 kilograms a piece. So the total energy storage, sorry, I keep moving the camera wrong. The total energy storage for the laser system is 1 ton. I just wanted it to be 1 ton to make it simple. And then we have the rest of the stuff there, and then it's mostly materials. Whether this is the correct way to design a laser, I have no idea. We don't have space lasers, well, that we know of. So, you know, I did my best. And maybe it's the complete wrong thing. Maybe it should look completely different. But as far as I can tell, this is how they look. So in the manual, I have listed out the stats and what it can do, so let's take a look at that. I won't produce this version of the manual yet. I have some things left to add, but I wanted to introduce this as the military option, if you will. Given recent events, we know that the military sure does spend a whole lot more than the civilian space industry, so, you know, we gotta get that money somehow. So, special payloads is now a section after the mass section. And we have the laser weapon option. For theater defense purposes, the ASCA spaceplane can fit a laser turret with 2-axis gimbling in its cargo bay, taking advantage of its 2 nuclear reactors to provide sufficient power for substantial energy bursts. So that's another reason to have the reactors, aside from doing the ISRU. The good thing about this is because you're only using the weapon for a short period of time, even if the crew is on board, it's not going to be too much radiation. It's not like doing the ISRU, which is actually going to be running for weeks or months. That's a whole lot more time and radiation in that case, but in this case we're talking about minutes usually. And the laser package includes an energy bank with battery and capacitor options and are fed by the reactor back power bus. Now also tied to the vehicle's water reservoir and titanium radiators for cooling. So the laser is cooled by the radiators on board the spaceplane, so we already have that going for us, but also by the water reservoirs that go into the radiator system, because we have 2 water tanks that total 3 tons of water, and that 3 tons of water you can just have that, instead of going through the radiators, we can just let the water heat up and absorb the heat from the laser unit that way. So we can't dissipate it through the radiators quickly enough because we're going to be doing these sudden bursts with the capacitors and the battery banks. That's a higher amount of energy than the radiators can handle because they're only supposed to handle the amount from the reactors, not the batteries, not the waste energy from the lasers. So we can use the water just heating up in order to absorb the extra energy. So one other pipe that has to go through aside from the power is going to be water. So we're going to have water pipes going through the system quickly in order to take the energy out. But the good thing about it is that those water pipes can move the water in liquid form as opposed to the ones going out to the radiators, which have to go out in gaseous form. So we can send the water through the laser much faster because it's still in liquid form than we can through the radiators. So there's various modes. If you're doing reactor-only mode, that's fine for a continuous laser. So because the reactors are still going, you're only using the reactor power, then you can have a continuous mode laser. And so this is going to dazzle the targets, their sensors, especially if it's long range. You can base the area coverage of the laser. It's not going to be as precise. It's got to cover a certain spot radius. So we can see at 100 kilometers, it's a radius of 122 millimeters. So that's 10 centimeter, no, 12.2 centimeters, obviously. And that, then you're sending that energy towards something like an antenna or some other sensor that can get blocked by that potentially, or heating of vulnerable externals. So we can deal with that. And then sustained burst, that's with the batteries. That can have a burst that's a whole minute long potentially or shorter. It depends on how much energy you want to shove into it. And then the capacitor spike is for 1 to 3 seconds. And that's if you really want to penetrate something. Wall plug efficiency, so converting the power to the power that the laser uses, we are going to have an efficiency of 30%, and then the amount of that's actually absorbed by the target is another 30%. So the overall efficiency is just 9%. That's how much of our reactor power or battery power or capacitor power is actually getting to the target. And then we have the 500 kilograms of batteries and 500 kilograms of supercapacitors. We know what kind of energy we can store in batteries of that size or capacitors of that size. And so we get our total amount of power and then how much power we actually have absorbed at the target. And so that's what you see in that table there. And then we have the waste heat handling, and we find out that given the fact that we've got 3 tons of water in our reservoir, the total amount of additional temperature that we're expecting given 1 minute of full use, meaning max capacitor. So even if we were running things, or actually there's both options. There's the 24 megajoule and then the 60 megajoule. That's the max capacitor one. The worst situation is that we're going to heat up the water by 4.8 Kelvin. So 1.9 Kelvin or 4.8 Kelvin, still that's not gonna get the water reservoir boiling, so that's the goal. Hopefully it's not already that hot. If the water reservoir is already too hot, then of course we can't run the laser. That's like in every sci-fi when your lasers overheat, well, your lasers overheat if the water reservoir is already at 95 Kelvin and not 95 Kelvin, what would it be? 268 Kelvin. No, 368 Kelvin. If it's 368 Kelvin, it's about to boil. You can't keep trying to get liquid water to the lasers. So you have to let the water reservoir cool. So that is the situation there. And then structural burn through. So we want to know how much damage can we do at different distances to certain metals. And we have a 3 millimeter aluminum and 1 millimeter titanium. Why these? those happen to be the skins and cabin thickness of the spaceplane itself. So the ASCA spaceplane, the cabin thickness is 3 millimeters aluminum, and the skin of the body in most places is 1 millimeter of titanium. So basically, this is as if you were going to be attacking another one of these spaceplanes. And so you could pierce through its skin. And then tanks, there's 1 millimeter titanium on the skin and another millimeter of titanium for the tank itself because it's inside the body. That's what you're looking at. 100 kilometers, you can manage it in 13 seconds with the reactor only. And then with the batteries, we can see that it's shorter amount of time, and with the capacitors, even shorter. And, we can really punch out targets within the render range in Kerbal Space Program. That's why I set these ranges to 2.25 meters is the render range in Kerbal Space Program, 22.5 is the physics range, and then 100 kilometers is where objects finally actually appear, right? If you know these ranges. So that's what I had on these. So this is the stats for the system, and I'll have more. I mean, this doesn't include the masses of the system, so I'll have that breakdown as well eventually. But yep, that's in the manual now. If people think that the laser would work differently or doubt this information here, by all means tell me. I mean, space lasers, I can only hypothesize. We are dealing with things in a relatively short range for space endeavors. 100 kilometers is still pretty close. You could try and shoot things much further than that. We're still talking about distances that would be at the edge of the range for terrestrial weapons as well. So we would see, but there it is. It's a space laser. It's about 3.4 tons, so it does fit within the capabilities of it. It doesn't have a whole lot of ability to turn, right? So they'd have to turn the ship to point at the target pretty decisively, and that is a fact. And actually the colliders on this are a little bit weird. Okay, so up in the bay it goes. I have to be very particular. Here, take a look. Let me retract this ramp. If we take a look, you can see the ladder of the ramp actually goes up into here. So I had to make this so that it goes around the ladder, so that when the ladder deploys, it goes like that. So the structure is all built around that. Anyway, so that's a little foible. So it's now armed with a space laser, or could be armed with a space laser. That is an option. I'm sure somebody will be happy with that. I have not adapted it to BD Armor yet. I intend to. I have to figure out how to do that, but this install doesn't have BD Armory because it would crash if I tried to add BD Armory to it. It's already at the edge of what I can put in here. So I will test it in a different install with BD Armory, and I look forward to that, and we'll see whether the laser can actually fire. But that is an introduction to the system, and that is not the only potential weapon system. So I'm eventually going to have this be in sort of a on-rails shooter game. This is not going to just be in Kerbal Space Program. My goal is for this to be eventually in my own little game. A very simple game, very quick sort of thing, but it'll be shooting its laser at stuff. And I also intend for these, right now they have the landing engines, but you could probably see that these could fit some other stuff in there if we wanted to. For instance, attack drones or missiles could potentially be up in there. And so these fairings here were always meant to have a potentially different purpose as well, depending on the game and whether you're just being a happy Kerbal explorer or you are defending your space domain. Alas, if only all the money could just go for civilian purposes, that'd be great, but we live in this world. So, with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.